Evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're very welcome to our meeting. This is such an important event that we felt in the parish that we should do something by way of information, and we thought that this particular forum might be the most effective, that we gather information from the table and then your questions, if any, further information will be gathered. We're probably being faced with the greatest decision that any generation has been in the past. So it's an extraordinary, delicate business. What we're trying to do is to give the people coming after us what the people before us gave us. In other words, the right to be born and to live. President Reagan said he was amazed that people in favour of abortion had all been born. We are lucky to have been born, and our aim hopefully is that those unborn will have the same rights as we have. Nan will chair the meeting, chairperson of our Pastoral Council. She'll introduce the speakers, and there'll be time for questions then afterwards. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Can you hear me down at the back of the class? I'd like to welcome you all here this evening on behalf of Monsignor McGrath, Father Roger, Father Tom Moore, and the whole Pastoral Council. And welcome you to this information evening on the 8th Amendment. A special welcome to our panel of speakers who have travelled some distance this evening to be with us. We are blessed to have such imposing speakers: Dr. Anthony O'Reilly, Caroline Simons, Vicky Wall, and probably one of our own, Professor William Rebel. I'll introduce them in more detail before they begin to speak. And I'm just going to explain to you first the format for the meeting tonight. Each guest speaker will talk for 15 minutes, and I'm going to be quite strict on time, so I will warn them 2 minutes in advance of your time. Just when all four have spoken, we will take questions from the floor. One question per person, and there will be no interruptions during the speeches. My hope is that we will all learn from the presentations here tonight, and that we will go home with a clearer understanding of why and how we will vote on May the 25th. Now, with due to that, I'm going to introduce the first speaker, who is Dr. Anthony O'Reilly, and he's familiar to you because he was on the TV3 news this evening. He's a pro-life medical practitioner from Naas with 13 years experience. Graduated from UCD in 2005 and a member of the Medical Alliance for the Faith. So I give you Dr. Anthony O'Reilly.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
Thanks very much for inviting me here today to talk. Great privilege to be here. And thank you all very much for coming. Whether you're pro-choice, pro-retain, or undecided, you're more than welcome. I'm a GP, as has been said. I've been a doctor for the last 13 years, and unfortunately Minister Harris has nominated myself and my colleagues without any prior consultation to roll out nationwide provision of early first trimester abortions in the event of the repeal of the 8th Amendment. Well, I'm sorry, Simon, but that's not going to happen. First and foremost, I firmly believe that the people of Ireland will overwhelmingly reject this abominable proposal. But even if the referendum was to carry, I can assure you that there's no threat and no incentive that a government could put in place that could force me to end the life of a baby. To someone who's devoted the past 13 years to caring for patients, the suggestion is completely unthinkable. From the first time a pregnant woman comes to see me or any GP, I'm aware that I'm treating 2 patients. And Leo Varadkar himself acknowledged the fact that he thought it strange for people to refer to the unborn as a fetus, as to do so is like calling your tongue your glossus. It doesn't make any sense. This is a baby. It has unique DNA from the moment of conception. It is a beating heart from day 22, pumping its own blood. By 8 weeks, all of its organs are functioning, and by 9 or 10 weeks, it has its own fingerprints. By only 6.5 weeks, it would look like a miniature baby in the palm of your hand. This is a miracle. This is a baby. And these facts hold true whether the pregnancy is a source of joy to the mother, as it usually is, or in difficult circumstances, when a woman presents with a crisis pregnancy. There are 2 patients there, no matter the situation. Regardless of the circumstances of their conception, an unborn baby is always unique and has the immense dignity due to any person. Nothing can add or detract from their inherent dignity. It is false compassion to suggest abortion as a solution to the circumstances of a difficult pregnancy. The government argue that we need to repeal the 8th Amendment to protect the health of women. Throughout the last 35 years, however, since the introduction of the 8th Amendment, Ireland has consistently ranked amongst the safest maternity services in the world for mothers and babies. No other area of our health service can compare to it in terms of it being consistently top class. Our record for maternal care has never been worse than 7th in the whole world since 1985. It's very hard to be world class at anything, and it would be absolutely inconceivable that if the 8th Amendment were causing serious impairments in the ability of doctors to care for their patients, that we could be achieving these standards. The last confidential maternal death inquiry carried out, for which we have figures, was from 2013 to 2015. Ireland's figures demonstrate the country to have exceptionally low maternal mortality rates. Over those 3 years, there were 15 maternal deaths. 2 of these deaths were totally unrelated to pregnancy. So there were 13 maternal deaths in pregnancy, and over those 3 years, 202,325 babies were born. To hear some obstetricians talking, you would think that women were regularly dying under their care because of the 8th Amendment. This is simply not true. On average, with well over 100 obstetricians in the country, and around 5 maternal deaths per year, the average obstetrician would have a woman die during pregnancy under their direct care less than once every 20 years. That is the reality of the situation in Ireland. I entered medical school 19 years ago to help people. I love my patients and I try and do my best for them. How could I look at myself in the mirror in the morning, knowing that I deliberately set out to kill my patients? What would I ever be able to tell my children about my work? How could I take pride in my profession, or advise anyone to pursue a career in general practice? More importantly, how would a patient feel about accepting a prescription from me if they thought that the last script I wrote could have been a patient's death sentence? How would a woman feel in theatre having a caesarean section if she knows that where her baby first sees the light of day is the same room countless other babies have had their lives brutally ended? The government have said that doctors like me, with a conscientious objection to abortion, do not have to participate in their proposals. but this is really not true, however. The proposed law will obligate me to directly refer my patients to a doctor who will either perform the abortion themselves or arrange for it to take place. This places me in an impossible position. I take very seriously to whom I refer my patients. I could not in good conscience refer a pregnant woman to someone who would deliberately kill their baby. In this scenario, if I refuse to refer the patient, I could be referred to the medical council, threatening my future career, even though a 5-second Google search would lead that lady to where she wanted to go. While the doctor who may brutally end the life of a healthy, thriving baby belonging to a healthy mother would be acting completely within the law. How perverse is that? Within a generation, there will be no doctors left in general practice, in obstetrics or gynecology, or anaesthetics who have true conscientious objection to abortion. Doctors who are willing to stand up for the weakest and most vulnerable would be permanently sidelined, leaving the remainder to continue their radical agenda of death for the inconvenient. The future integrity of medicine in Ireland is firmly on the line here. The famous line coined by Bill Clinton of making abortion safe, legal and rare has been adopted by Minister Catherine Zappone. The reality is that Bill Clinton never presided over a regime where abortion was rare. There were over 1 million a year, every year in his presidency in America. Our government is trying to argue against all logic that its proposals are somehow restrictive. However, allowing unrestricted abortion up to 12 weeks is similar to many other European countries, in all of whom the abortion rates dramatically increased in the year after legalisation. And the government's proposals go far beyond that. Up until viability, or 24 weeks, it will be legal to perform an abortion where there is a serious risk to the health of the mother. And in this context, health means both mental health and physical health. The grounds of mental health is the grounds on which 97% of abortions in the United Kingdom are performed at the moment. And the head of BPAS, Anne Farady, has said that when a woman looks to get an abortion under these grounds, she has to, this is what the head of one of the abortion services said, the largest abortion services, she has to, the process is thus: the woman has to pretend to have a mental breakdown, and doctors have to pretend to believe them. I've heard Yes campaigners saying that the wording in the proposed legislation is different from that of the UK, and that this will somehow lead to a more restrictive form of abortion on mental health grounds. The wording here is of a serious risk to the mental health of the mother, of the health of the mother. That includes the mental health. It's very interesting to note, however, that in New Zealand, a country with a population slightly smaller than Ireland, they have almost exactly the same wording in their law. It's a serious risk to the mental health of the mother. And, does that mean that less than 97% of abortions are carried out on mental health grounds there? No, it's actually 98% of abortions that occur on mental health grounds there. And even though they've got a smaller population than Ireland, in 2016 they had over 12,000 abortions in New Zealand. And that was actually a very good year for them. Since the 2000s, since the turn of the century, they've had some years with more than 17,000 abortions in a country with a smaller population than Ireland. So as sure as night follows day, if we legalise abortion in Ireland, the number of abortions will rise dramatically. Worldwide figures of abortion are mind-blowing, and testament to the fact that when it's introduced, abortion can never be controlled. The Guttmacher Institute, a pro-choice American institute, estimates that there were an average of 56 million abortions worldwide every year between 2010 and 2014. That's more than 1 million abortions every week. 153,000 people will die today from abortion. Let's put that into further context. If you survive to birth, the number one cause of death in the world is heart disease, or ischemic heart disease. And that claims an average of about 8.75 million lives per year. Figures for death from all causes of cancer combined in 2012 was 8.2 million in the year. So if we combine the figures for those dying from all causes of cancer and heart disease, you don't even reach 1/3 the number of babies who are dying from abortion. This is truly and utterly frightening. In fact, if you try and find out how many people in the world die of all causes, after birth each year, you get different figures. UNICEF quotes a figure of about 52 million, the CIA quotes a figure of about 59 million. So at the moment, doctors are ending roughly as many lives through abortion as people are dying from all other causes of death combined. I know that a lot of people, some people who are considering voting yes, are doing so on the basis of that they think that it should be allowable in cases of rape and in cases of life-limiting conditions. So I'd like to deal with those cases for just a moment or two. Rape is an absolutely abominable crime. And we need to do everything that we can to support victims of rape. I firmly believe that sentences for rape are far too lenient at the moment and they need to be increased. Even when a woman becomes pregnant as a result of rape, it's impossible to deny the fact that her unborn baby is a completely innocent party and their life deserves to be protected. We do not propose to kill the rapist. The life of the unborn baby should not be taken either. We're going to hear further tonight about life-limiting conditions from Vicky Wall. You're very lucky that she's here to share with you her amazing story of herself and her daughter Leah. But if you're considering voting yes on the basis of cases of rape and life-limiting conditions, you need to be aware that in countries where liberal abortion regimes, such as Ireland, such as what is proposed for Ireland, that cases of rape and life-limiting conditions only account for around 1% of abortions in these countries. So if you think that abortion is justifiable in these cases, you need to be aware that there are going to be 2 coachloads of babies who have nothing to do with these cases at all, dying as well. Pro-repeal doctors have stated that approximately 5,000 abortions could be envisaged every year. As I've already said, I firmly believe that this number would increase dramatically. However, even if it stays static at 5,000, doctors would be ending the lives of more babies than any other single cause of death in the country at the moment. The number one cause of death in Ireland also is heart disease. And in 2016, about 4,400 people died from it. So from the word go, doctors will be killing more patients than any other cause of death in the country. I think that's something that should give us a real pause for thought. There's been a lot of discussion as well around the need for abortion on medical grounds, and cases advanced by the repeal side have been very limited. In particular, there's been a lot of focus on the tragic death of Savita Halpanagar. Analysis of the circumstances surrounding her death clearly show that her death didn't have anything to do with the 8th Amendment. She died as a complication of sepsis, and unfortunately her care while in hospital was very suboptimal. There were 3 reports into her death, and they identified 13 different instances where, if things had been done differently, her life may have been saved. From the day that she went into hospital, she had a blood test done. On the day she went into hospital, she had a blood test done which showed that she had a very raised white cell count, which is an indication of infection. And this alone would have been grounds enough to end her pregnancy, because, when she was admitted, it was diagnosed that she had an inevitable miscarriage, really. And basically, from day one of her admission, it would have been perfectly justifiable under our current law to end her pregnancy. I'd like to leave you just a few thoughts. Obviously, none of us would be here today if our mother had had an abortion. And when you look back to generations, you quickly see that our family tree really is a family tree. It spreads out very, very quickly. We have 2 parents, 4 grandparents, 8 great-grandparents, 16 great-great-grandparents. And it gets, as I say, our family tree spreads out very quickly. In fact, if you go back 10 generations, and that's really only about slightly more than 300 years, we've got 1,024 10th great-grandparents. And if you add up all of the people who came down the generations to you at the moment, of those just 10 generations, that's 2,046 people. If any one single one of those people had been aborted, you wouldn't be here today. I wouldn't be here today. Successive generations are relying on us for their lives to vote no in this referendum. As we've heard from Monsignor, there has never been a more important day in the history of our state than the 25th of May 2018. And I would request, and I would urge you to do everything that you can to ensure that we save the 8th Amendment. Please vote no.
Thank you, Dr. Riley, for a wonderful speech. Our next speaker is Caroline Simons, solicitor from Dublin, full graduate qualifications in medical law, and she is legal consultant to the National Pro-Life Campaign, and you may think you know her too, because she was on the late list recently. Caroline Simons.
Graduate qualifications are just the postgraduate one. Anyway, thank you very much for the invitation here this evening, for everybody who's here. Thank you for all who've come to our canvassing. I know we have people here who are voting yes and canvassing for yes. I know we have people who are voting canvassing for no, and I know we have people here who aren't quite sure what they're doing. So I hope this evening just to, in a short 15 minutes, and you can warn me when you're getting close to the end, describe to you what exactly it is we're voting on, because there's an awful lot of talk going on about things that are not actually up for decision on the 25th of May. So let's look in fact at what we are talking about. On the 25th of May, you're going to be asked if you agree to remove from the Constitution the 8th Amendment and to put in its place the 36th Amendment, which is going to give the office power to make laws regulating the termination of abortion, termination of pregnancy, I beg your pardon. So, it sounds pretty similar maybe to what we have now. We, after all, now have the 2013 Act, which also allows for the termination of pregnancies, as we all know. But this is slightly different. This would remove all constitutional protection from all unborn babies in the Constitution. The reins that you currently hold to define the parameters of abortion law would be gone. You would have given them all to politicians. The politicians then would have a blank check to make whatever kind of abortion laws they would like, with whatever restrictions, whatever time limits, and whatever grounds they decide would be appropriate. And we're told that it's going to be restrictive. And we've been given an example of the kind of legislation the government intends to pass if we vote no. The first thing to say about that legislation is that it's not worth the paper it's written on. It could be a fairy story. Because as the Taoiseach said on the 29th of January, what's the other hand? Oh gosh, thank you. As the Taoiseach said on the 29th of January, when he stood on a platform with Catherine Zappone on one hand, the Minister for Children, and the Minister for Health on the other side in Paris, he said there are no guarantees about this legislation, and nor can there be, because he leads a minority government, as we know, and the heads of the bill which have been drafted will have to go through the process of debating and argumentation and amendment and everything in the Dáil and in the channel. Can you all hear me there as well? Yes. In that case, I better speak clearly. Anyway, the first thing to say is that the government in March produced two documents, not just the heads of the bill, the general scheme of the bill, but also a policy document which was going to inform the heads of the bill. Of interest to us this evening is policy number 9, gestational limits for termination of pregnancy. And in that policy, which was to inform the bill that came out at the end of March, they said the termination of pregnancy for a fetal condition likely to lead to death before or shortly after birth, or for maternal health, should not have a gestational limit in the general scheme. Now the reason I'm drawing this to your attention is one of the things we've heard several times from Minister Harris is that his bill is effectively a ban on late-term abortions, unquote. In fact, it's no such thing. And I'm going to tell you why. So let's have a little look at the bill. Just quickly, I don't plan on boring you in relation to it because we're not actually voting on it, but just to tell you what it says. At the moment, this bill provides for one medical procedure and one medical procedure only. You're told that it's going to involve looking after babies after viability. You're told it's going to involve trying to preserve fetal life where possible. Those things are in the 2013 Act that we have now. They are not mentioned anywhere in this Act, in this bill. In this draft bill, there is one medical procedure that is provided for. It's called termination of pregnancy. But what does it mean? It's defined as, quote, a medical procedure which is intended to end the life of the fetus. Not the pregnancy, which is intended to end the life of the fetus. That is the only medical procedure which is provided for in the bill that the government intends to introduce if we vote no. So we're not talking about anything other than that. We're told that it's limited. We're also told that it's not going to allow any abortions on the basis of disability. But I'm sorry, I can't give you any assurances in relation to that either. The job of the lawyer is to explore the contours of the legislation to see what interpretations might be possible, what might be reasonable, and nothing I'm going to say to you here today is extreme or off the wall. I'm just looking at the wording which has been presented to us. So, we have a procedure designed to end the life of the unborn. In circumstances where, I must remind you, it has never been demonstrated that abortion, that is the intentional destruction of a baby, is necessary to address any complication of pregnancy, any health issue, or any threat to the woman's life. Most certainly, it is necessary, sometimes before viability, to deliver babies, but not to intentionally go in to destroy them. We can come back to that shortly. There are a number of heads of the bill, a number of how to describe it, conditions upon which you'll be able to access this abortion as we would understand the word to be. The first one is where there's a risk to the life of or serious harm to the health of the pregnant woman. Now we know that already when there's a risk to the life of the woman, we can terminate pregnancies at any point in pregnancy. We also know that doctors are obliged to attend to health issues in pregnant women. They're obliged under the, I think it's Article 48.1 of the Code of Ethics of the medical practitioners in Ireland, which is set out in 2016 by the governing body for all medical practitioners, the Medical Council. This procedure is now to be allowed where the fetus hasn't reached viability and where two doctors consider that it's appropriate, not necessary, mind, but appropriate to carry out the termination of pregnancy. So I should have started to say, in fact, in the first 12 weeks, I skipped a page by mistake here, sorry about that. In the first 12 weeks, abortions will be available on request, on demand, without any reason having to be given. And although Dr. O'Reilly has explained to you what position is in the UK, we know that in effect, and the UN has accepted this as well, in effect abortion is available on demand in the UK. We saw even Kitty Holland in the Irish Times a couple of weeks ago saying nobody asked her for any reason, because nobody actually does. And we do know that 97% of abortions do not take place for any of the particularly hard cases we're hearing about, and that of that 97%, 99.8% take place on the mental health ground. So that, in fact, is a euphemism for abortion on demand in the UK. So after the 12-week period then, there's abortion allowed where two doctors consider it appropriate up to the stage of viability of the fetus. in circumstances where there isn't a shred of medical evidence that this is necessary to address a complication of pregnancy or a life-threatening risk. And we must remember that under the same code of ethics of the Medical Council, doctors are obliged to practice evidence-based medicine and to use the best medical standards. So we are moving away from evidence-based medicine here into something that is being requested as a service and not something that is demonstrably necessary as a medical need. So the next two categories don't have any time limit at all. One of them is where there's a risk to life or health in an emergency, and doctors consider that it's necessary to terminate the pregnancy, as in to terminate the baby, not the pregnancy. And the final one is then for this condition likely to lead to death of the fetus before birth or shortly afterwards. The thing to say about the first one is that we already can terminate pregnancies with this risk to life or health in an emergency. If it's an emergency and it's necessary in that sense, then we really are talking about a risk to life. And the cases that have been brought up to warrant this kind of thing by the Yes campaign, I'd like to discuss those in some detail because they have been generating an amount of confusion which really shouldn't be necessary. So I think I'm going to leave the bill there unless there are questions from the floor afterwards. But just to know, you're being asked to remove the 8th, and then you're being asked to give a blank cheque to the government. The next thing to say about that is, we're told we're going to have restrictive legislation. In fact, the legislation which will follow repeal cannot be restricted. And if it is, it will only be temporary. And if you don't believe me, just to say to you, Professor Jerry White, a constitutional law professor at Trinity College, has said that in 1983 the Constitution was silent on abortion because the people hadn't yet spoken. In 2018, if the Constitution is going to be silent on abortion because the people have spoken and have removed the right to life of the unborn, then the court will have to construe the Constitution as only protecting the mother's constitutional law rights to autonomy, to bodily integrity, to privacy. And on the other side of the scales of justice, there will be an invisible entity, somebody who is invisible to the eyes of the constitutional lawyers, the unborn baby with no rights at all. So any legislation which restricts a mother's access to abortion, either on grounds or because of time limits after the 8th Amendment is gone, will not be able to withstand a constitutional challenge. That is the position. Now, I think Professor Jerry White, a constitutional lawyer in Trinity, might favour one side of the debate. He doesn't ostensibly. Professor William Binchy, who agrees with him, obviously does. He's been campaigning in relation to abortion for many years. But just to let you all know that one of the senior legal advisors to the repeal campaign also sees the effect of the removal of the 8th Amendment in exactly the same light. And what she has said is that, and I'm quoting her directly now, if the 8th Amendment is repealed, quote, we could have interim legislation as a stopgap on the way to light touch or almost no regulation at all, unquote. That is the legal position if the 8th Amendment is removed. So that is something we ought all be able to agree on. That is why it's such a prize for people who wish that abortion would be available for whatever reason the woman chooses, at whatever point in pregnancy she deems it to be necessary. And that is why people on the retaining side, if you like, are so anxious to keep the 8th Amendment. Now, there are a lot of people in the middle, and I know that I have met even consultant doctors in the last number of weeks, as well as lay people, who have said, well, you know, we're not sure. This question, the question we're deciding isn't actually a medical question. It's a question of what value we want to place on the woman's right to autonomy, on the one hand, and on the baby's right to life, on the other. And that's a question of which you don't have to be a doctor to decide, you don't have to be a lawyer, you simply have to think carefully about the question and make up your own mind. But some people, doctors included, feel that perhaps there are exceptionally hard cases. We know that they are very few, but they are real. And we know that they're dealt with in a particular way in this country, which doesn't result in a worse maternal mortality than in any other country in which abortion is widely available. We do score very, very well internationally. There's been some confusion. Peter Boylan, for instance, and others have said, oh well, surviving birth, I mean, death is a very low bar. And I agree with them. It is. If all we expected a woman to do was survive birth, well then I'm afraid I don't think I'd be standing here advocating this side of the debate. In fact, the Medical Council's ethical guidelines also oblige doctors to look to the care of the health of their patient. And the maternal mortality figures, which Dr. O'Reilly has referred to, which were issued in December 2017, also contained a fancy name, maternal morbidity figures. And morbidity is a fancy medical name for serious health issues. And even in relation to the serious health issues, Ireland compares extremely favourably with other jurisdictions across the world where abortion is easily available. Is the person who's done this stand up? Thank you very much. So just to say that to you, and you know, doctors look after their patients, whether they have cancer, whether they have cervical cancer. They have been looking after patients with these complaints for forever. And yet we don't lose mothers in the same degree as they do in the UK, where abortion is freely available. So I wanted to talk to you now a little bit about some of the myths that are going around. How am I doing in minutes? Yeah? Thank you. Forward just enough. I don't know if any of you buy hot dress or if you've got the current edition of it, but it's so worrying and misleading. I'm bringing it up just to talk about it with you. In it, there are 4 pages of an interview with Dr. Peter Gordon, who I had the pleasure of debating on Ocean Radio in Donegal for 2 hours last Friday. And there are a number of claims in it that are particularly worrying because they're in fact not based in fact at all. The first thing I would bring to your attention is, he says here, Down syndrome. The proposition that Down syndrome will be eliminated is just incorrect, another lie. And he has said persistently throughout this campaign that babies with Down syndrome won't be identified, can't be identified in sufficient time for mothers who are carrying them to terminate those pregnancies, to have abortions in the first 12 weeks. I hope you all listened carefully to the radio last week when you heard Rona Mahoney drop the ball on that one, with Claire Byrne on, I think, Friday morning, was it? And then Peter Gordon was brought in at lunchtime to do the same point and followed up by Fergal Malone. Each of them have actually made clear at this stage what we knew from the very beginning. Non-invasive prenatal testing, called NIPT, is a blood test done on a woman when she's 9 or 10 weeks pregnant. If they don't find enough fetal cells when you're 9 weeks pregnant, they do the test again at 10 weeks. The test, which you're told costs €500, is in fact being advertised as available for €299, with return of the information to the doctor who requested it in 8 days. And in fact, we've heard that it's available more quickly than that. The reality is that these tests are available in the Coombe, the Rotunda, the National Maternity Hospital, the Beacon, and in maternity hospitals around the country, Cork, Galway, everywhere. Obstetricians can send the blood to outside laboratories based in the UK and the US who do the testing for them. And the reality is that these tests, they say, are screening. They will not tell you conclusively that you've got Down syndrome, Edwards syndrome, or Patau syndrome, but they will tell you with 99% accuracy whether or not you're expecting a child with Down syndrome. And the French equivalent of the HSE has said women are unlikely to wait for any further testing when they get results that are that clear. The other thing I should say to you is that there are similar tests which are not yet commercially available, but almost, which are diagnostic, which will tell you without any need for any further testing if your child has particular genetic conditions. So there is no doubt that babies with disabilities will be identifiable in the first 12 weeks and will be terminated. Similarly, on mental health risks, terminations can happen through pregnancy at least to the 24th week. So that's a myth that needs to be known. The other myth, before I sit down just to tell you, is that women have not died because of the 8th Amendment. I know it sounds awful to say, but I would never, ever, ever have gotten involved in this campaign if I thought women were going to be let die because of the laws of our land. I know personally speaking that they're not, because I've been through the mill obstetrically, but apart from that, let's look quickly at the 4 cases they talk about. Peter Gordon has talked about Sheila Hodgers, who died a horrendous death and medical negligence as far as I'm concerned personally. A horrendous death. But she died 6 months before the Irish people voted to put the 8th Amendment into the Constitution, so she did not die because of the 8th Amendment. Michelle Hart died of melanoma for which she's been treated for 9 years. She wanted to participate in a clinical trial for an unapproved drug, which she was not allowed to do because she was pregnant, because the rules of the international regulators for clinical trials didn't allow that. Again, it had nothing whatsoever to do with the 8th Amendment. Then he mentioned Ms. P. Ms. P came to our attention in December 2014, a young 26-year-old woman who had had a brain aneurysm and who had been declared brain dead when 15 weeks pregnant. She was dead, so the 8th Amendment didn't kill her. And when her case was brought to the High Court, and when her father wanted the hospital to switch off her life support, the hospital staff had thought she was stable enough to maintain the pregnancy perhaps. The High Court didn't find any difficulty when the evidence was to the contrary, and they certainly were not impeded by the 8th Amendment in saying to the hospital, switch off her life support. And just to say to you, there was a similar case the previous year in Texas. Marlene Munoz, another woman on life support, again, court said, she's brain dead, she's dead, switch off the machines. There were 2 other cases, one in the same year, 2013, the year before ours, also all at 15 and 16 weeks gestation, women declared brain dead. One in Saudi Arabia and one in Hungary. And women in those circumstances, they were kept on life support for 91 days, I think, and 110 days, and healthy babies were delivered at 27 and 32 weeks gestation because the families wanted that effort to be made. The fact is, doctors do not have to make such extreme efforts to save the life of an unborn baby in this country. You are not, there's an old saying that goes back hundreds of years, thou shalt not kill, but needs not strive officiously to keep alive. Doctors are only meant to do what's reasonable and what's practicable. But in those cases, the woman seemed to be stable and the families wanted the pregnancies to continue if it were possible. The law does not require that in Ireland. And finally, Savita Halapanavar, who Dr. O'Reilly has really dealt very properly with, I would just say there was one report. The HIPAA report said 13 missed opportunities, which if they had been seen would have resulted in a more aggressive action being taken more quickly and her being delivered, probably the day before she even asked for the termination. But the HSE report, which Ari Kumnaran published, did give 3 causes of death for her. Not one of them was the 8th Amendment, but she suggested that the 8th Amendment may have contributed to the second cause. And if you actually read what he said, it may have been a misinterpretation of the 8th Amendment, or it may have been a failure to monitor. So he didn't actually make a finding that the 8th Amendment had contributed, had actually caused her death. And you have to be clear about that. So the 4 cases that are being relied on, Sheila Hodges, Michelle Hart, Savita Halapanavar, and Miss Key, none of those cases did children die because of the 8th Amendment. So I would like people not to be upset about that, and I would like you to consider very carefully that if you vote yes on the 25th of May, the vast majority of babies who will be terminated as a result of your decision, and we are the only people in any jurisdiction that I'm aware of who would make this decision ourselves. In other countries, courts made it or the politicians made it. But on the basis of your decision, if you vote yes, 97% of babies, going by other statistics in other jurisdictions, whose lives are going to be terminated are going to be healthy babies with healthy mothers. So I'd ask you all to think carefully about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline, for a very interesting and very informative. So, our next speaker is Professor William Rebel, Emeritus Professor of Biochemistry and a science columnist for the Irish Times and the Irish Capital. And best of all, he comes from Quay Street University.
Thank you very much. As Nan said originally, I'm on home territory here in Ross. That was a long time ago. I was born in Quay Street and I was raised there. I first went to school down the street, in Michael Street in St. Joseph's, baby infants. Then the rest of my primary and secondary was in the Christian Brothers before I went to UCT. So, as you know, it's now okay corral time for abortion in Ireland. And on the 25th of this month, there will be a referendum for it. So you wouldn't hear very often from scientists contributing to this debate. It's mostly medical or legal or religious. So does science have anything important to say about abortion? And it does, indeed. It has vitally important things to say about it. And only for the scientific knowledge of the human biology, of the human, the position of the Catholic Church, for example, is heavily informed by the scientific knowledge we have of the development of the human. And it's only since the late 1800s, I think, that church teaching said that life had to be protected from the time of conception. It used to be later on, but that was because later on than conception, but that was because the biology of human reproduction wasn't known. So science has very important things to say, but science can't tell you whether or not abortion is right or wrong, because science doesn't deal in morals. In order to decide whether an abortion would be morally right or morally wrong, you have to turn to philosophy or religion. Religion is a form of philosophy anyway. So what does science say? Now this is stunningly simple, what I'm going to tell you, and you know it, but because I'm a scientist, maybe it will have an added clause. But a human being begins at conception, when a single cell from the father, called a sperm cell, unites with a cell from the mother, called an egg cell. And these two cells fuse together to form a single bigger cell called a zygote. And that zygote is a new human being. And that zygote, single cell, is the first stage of human development called the embryonic stage, which lasts for 3 months. After that you have the fetal stage, then you have birth. So at the start you have the zygote, which is the embryonic stage. It lasts for 3 months. Then you have the fetus, then you have the born baby, then you have the child, the adolescent, the adult, the elderly person, and eventually death. And that is a continuum of human life, starting with the zygote and ending in death. Now the same entity is involved all the way along the line. The zygote just gets bigger, it divides in two, the two daughter cells divide in two, you have 4 cells, then you have 8 cells, gets bigger, it develops new capacities and properties and loses old ones, and eventually it's born as a baby, and then the baby becomes an adult, and then. So it's all the same entity that you're talking about. Every stage along that human continuum has the properties and characteristics that are appropriate to that stage. Obviously, the embryo doesn't have the same characteristics. Me as an embryo wouldn't have the same characteristics as me as another fellow. But we are still exactly the same person. We're still the same person. The full human essence is there. In the single cell zygote, you have the full human genome. And these genetic instructions orchestrate the development all along the continuum of life. The same, and the full genetic instructions are there. The sex of the new human being is fixed in the zygote. They're either male or female. And there are no other sexes. But we won't go into that, just male or female. So, everything all the way along the continuum of life has the characteristics and properties appropriate to that stage. Now, everybody understands the continuity between a child and the adult. I remember my childhood, early childhood, in New Ross, and I remember the stages since. So obviously, I am continuous with myself as a child, but I'm equally continuous with myself as an embryo. It's just that I don't remember the stages from before birth. But they are there and continuous. So you are a full human being from the time you were conceived. If you are not, what are you? You have the full genome, you have the full thing, and it is the zygote that develops and gets bigger and develops new capacities and loses old capacities. Now you'll hear it said, in order to excuse abortion, that the early embryo is only a little ball of cells, as if it's not very much. Well, it is a little ball of cells, but it's a most extraordinary little ball of cells. If it were only a little ball of cells, it would be possible to take a little ball of cells from your skin or from your liver or wherever. If you take that little ball of cells from your skin, say, and put that little ball of cells into a womb, nothing will happen. It won't develop into anything. But the zygote and the early embryo, even though it's small and there's only a little ball of cells, is extraordinarily complex and sophisticated. And it has capacities and properties that are more sophisticated than some of the properties that you have later on as an adult. For example, the cells in the early embryo are very flexible. They're called embryonic stem cells. They are capable of developing into all of the 200 different types of cell tissues that you have in your adult body. Now, the cells in your adult body are not capable of doing that. So an embryo is capable of doing things that you're not capable of doing as an adult. So it's not a simple little primitive ball of anything. It's a very, very sophisticated thing. And it's working very hard to do its job of development. First of all, it's just a single cell, then it divides in two. Now, as early as the first division into two daughter cells, the two cells are different. They're not two identical daughter cells. One is on top and the other is on the bottom, and gravity is starting to differentiate out the top of the body from the bottom of it. So you're talking about, the whole thing is working to a very complex and sophisticated molecular plan. So for me, it's enough to know that there's a continuum of life from the zygote up to death at the other end. And that is enough to tell me that the embryo at the early stage has enough value, it has at least enough human value, so that, or such that, it doesn't deserve to be deliberately killed. I don't need to go to any fancy philosophy. But what comes in then is the philosophical arguments. Now, I'm a biologist, and what I've said are facts. There is no doubt about it that life begins at conception. To say otherwise is biologically illiterate, and even the pro-choice people have stopped saying that. So you're a full human being from the start, but they don't quite allow food, because it's said, yeah, it's complex and it's sophisticated, but it's not yet a person. It's not a full human person. And you see, you have to have some argument, otherwise you're talking about murder. If you're killing a human being, it's a horrendous thing. And if you're going to be aborting and killing the biological life that's there, if you admit it's a full human being, that's a very big thing and would not be allowable. So the argument goes, it's a potential human person, but it's not a human person yet. And when does it become a human person? Only at birth, right? So you can kill up to birth and you're still not committing a murder. A murder is a big term, I don't like using it. And I know that people who carry out abortions are not murderers because they are convinced that they're killing something that is not a full human person. Now, the biological things I told you are facts that cannot be denied. But there are many biologists who know, all biologists know these facts, but they don't all come to the same conclusion as me. And that's because in order to decide on the value or the moral value of the things I'm talking about, you have to turn to philosophy. Science does not deal in values. It just deals in physical facts. It doesn't tell you the embryo is less or more important than a later stage, or a later stage is more important than a previous stage. It just tells you what the stages are. It doesn't tell you what the value of them is. So you have to turn to philosophy. Now, there are two ways in philosophy of looking at things. One is called functionalism, and the other is called essentialism. And functionalism looks or defines the value of a thing according to the ability the thing has to do things, to do certain things. And it defines a person, a human person, as an entity that can remember the past, can look forward to the future, can anticipate, can fear, can regret, and can do all these things. So that's a human person. If you can't do these things, you're not a human person. Obviously, the embryo cannot do these things. Right? So therefore it's not. According to this definition, it's not a human person. And therefore it's allowable to end its life under certain conditions. That's functionalism. Now, functionalism has a problem, a technical problem, in the sense that if you accept that definition, you have to wonder then about somebody who's in a coma. But somebody who's in a coma, certain types of coma anyway, cannot remember things, they cannot anticipate things, they cannot regret things, they cannot fear things. So if you define life on the basis of this functionalism, it would be possible to terminate the life of a person in a coma under a wide range of circumstances. Indeed, you'd even wonder about somebody who was in a deep sleep. So it's not a great definition of things, but it suits if you want to argue for abortion. Now, the other type of definition, of philosophical definition of personhood is called essentialism. And essentialism defines the nature of things according to the essence that they contain, the essence that they contain. Now, it seems clear to me that the full essence of human being is present all the way along the biological continuum. And that way of philosophically understanding life seems to me to harmonize much, much better with the biological continuum. So I would say that the embryo is not a potential person, it's a person with potential. It's not yet a musician, it's not yet a scientist, it's not yet a whatever. So, as an embryo, I didn't have a name, but I was a rebel, I suppose, because that's my parents were, my father was. So, I didn't have a Christian name. So I was rebel with the potential to become a scientist. Not a potential anything, not a potential person. That really is the nub of my argument. People would say to me frequently, you only say these things because you're religious. Now, I'm a Catholic, not a very good one, but I am. And I'm that version of a Catholic that is particularly suspicious called a practicing Catholic. You know, apparently you can be a Catholic but not be a practicing Catholic. Again, I don't understand that. But you wouldn't say these things, and they will not be persuaded otherwise. When I tell them, I'm not saying this because I'm a Catholic, I'm saying this for independent reasons. The Catholic Church also says this. We parallel each other in our beliefs on the matter, but I am not dictated to by religion. I don't have to be. And if the Catholic Church, for some strange reason, decided next month, God knows you wouldn't know what would happen, things have gone so strange, that it had a big problem with abortion, I wouldn't change my mind. My mind is made up on that. So, all people, whether they're religious or not, live by a code of morality, and in all civilized codes of morality, it is not permissible to kill a human being. Now, this applies to atheists as much as it applies to the Pope. And I know atheists who are anti-abortion, would be pro-life, based purely on their understanding of the biology of life as I have described it to you. So it isn't necessary even to be religious. It's more fundamental than that. It's a primary attitude, civilized attitude of basic natural law morality. So just in a couple of sentences to summarize my point, there is a continuum of human life that begins at conception and proceeds in an unbroken line of continuity to the other end of death, if you're lucky, in old age. And the full essence of humanity is present right from the start to the end. And therefore, it is not moral. If it's immoral to kill somebody after birth, it is equally immoral to kill that person on the continuum before birth. So, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Will. Lawrence and St. Joseph's would be proud of you now, wouldn't they? Our final speaker this evening is Vicky Wall. Vicky provides her personal testimony with regard to life-limiting diagnosis of her unborn baby. And Vicky was also involved in establishing bereavement services in our hospitals. Vicky.
it's tough to hear all these words and terms, and yeah, I still haven't got used to it. So as you know, my name is Vicky Wall, and I'm from a group of parents called Area Life Parents. I'd like to tell you my story about my baby Liadh and how I feel he and protected us both. So in 2014, I became pregnant with my third child, and after the initial shock was a surprise pregnancy, we were overjoyed. All went well until at 24 weeks at scanning Waterford Hospital. It turned out that they said there might be something wrong with the baby. Now, up until this point, I was blissfully unaware that this scan would even tell you that there was something wrong with the baby. I genuinely thought this scan was to tell me was she blue or pink. And that's all I wanted to do, was get out of that hospital and shoot down to Next and get a pretty outfit. So when they said there might be something wrong, first of all they told us that she had pains, which is club feet. I thought I could fix that, that's okay, I'll take that. And then she said, I think you need to go to Dublin. So my next question to her was, what was she? What gender was she? And she said she was a little girl. So there and then we called her Liadh, which is the Waterford name. We went to Dublin. In 2 or 3 days, we got a call to go up. And a midwife, a very lovely midwife, was scanning us and taking all these measurements. And in swoops a doctor and a consultant. And he said, stay there, I'll scan you, I'll scan you. And she said, oh, I've measurements here. And he said, I've got to go, I was emergency C-section, I'll just have a look. So very quickly he scanned me. And even though I knew there was risks going on at the minute, Hollis Street had these beautiful scans up in the wall, and it was 15 years since I had a scan. And I was just so happy getting to see her. She was so active and she was kicking and moving, and I could feel what I could see. So I was so happy to be there watching her. And within a couple of minutes, this very clever doctor looked at me and said, I'm sorry, love, she has trisomy 18. I didn't know what that was. It's Edwards syndrome. And then he said, she's incompatible with life. And I didn't know what that was either. I didn't know what that meant. Incompatible with your life to me is like when you go to the dog pound, and I love dogs, don't get me wrong. When you go to a dog pound and you bring a dog home, it doesn't work out sticking the flowers, poo in the hole, point in the case. The dog is incompatible with the family, so you're going to bring the dog back. How could my child, how could my daughter be incompatible with my life? So I asked him, how could we help her? What could we do? And he said that my only option was to pop to an egg, insinuating an abortion to end her life. Now I'm looking at this screen, and this baby is so active, and she was so loved. And that minute, there was an instant feeling of overwhelming protection. More so because she was not well, more so because she was sick. We hear a lot about women's journeys that have to travel to England. And my heart breaks, it honestly does, for every woman that feels that her only option is an abortion and she has to travel for that. That breaks my heart. If I could help every single one of them, I would. But I had to make a journey. I had to walk out of that hospital with my partner that didn't know what to do with me. I couldn't breathe for the crying. And I had to hail a taxi. And then I had to get to Houston Station. And then I had to get on a packed train at 5:30 on a Friday evening. And travel home on that train to Waterford. With people looking at me with this big bump that I was so proud of. And I couldn't stop crying. And I'm not a crier. Long ago, before then I wasn't. And the woman sitting across from me, because we had to sit at a table, that was the only spaces there, she had a flask of tea and some biscuits. I remember she couldn't but look at me, and I felt so guilty, but I just couldn't stop crying. And she said to me, "Would you like some tea?" And I just shook my head because I couldn't open my mouth to speak. And then she looked at my big bump that was squashed into this table. And she said, "Have you long left?" And I just said, "Well, I don't know." And that's my journey. I don't slight anybody else's journey, but I ask that people don't slight my journey either. We went back to Waterford for our care holiday, and they were amazing. And they offered us perinatal care, which is a very simple, cheap, effective care strategy for babies that are known not to live for long after birth. So each week, we were allowed, or whenever we wanted actually, go down and have scans and get to see her. And they'd tell us each week how much she'd grown, and we'd get pictures. So we were allowed to bring family members down for these scans, so they got to meet her. And I always hoped she would live for a while. But I asked my consultant, was she in any distress or pain or discomfort? And he said, "No, Vicky. She is fine and happy where she is. All she can feel is you loving her." He said, "Come out of work now." He said, "These are her moments now. These are her first steps. Spend them with her." So I did. I came out of work, because I was working myself into the ground. I was going to pretend none of this was happening. But I came out of work, and my dad built this lovely patio area down the back of the garden. And I'm not one for sitting still. But we sat still, and we told her stories, Dr. Sue stories. We told her every day how much we loved her. Her brother and sister would talk to her and play One Direction to my bump, which I hated. Ty, her brother, learned in school that if I drank milk every day, that she would have strong bones. So he's forced me to drink milk. But we spent time with her. And that was so incredibly valuable. People did say to us, well-meaning people, I've yet to meet bad people. They said to us, "You're getting too attached. The children are getting too attached." And I would just say to them, "We're not getting attached. This is our daughter. It's their sister. We love her already." Do you not love somebody knowing that their life is going to be short or they're going to die? Because if we didn't, then we'd love nobody. At 32 weeks pregnant, she is still doing well and growing. And each week, when she gained weight, we'd buy her a new outfit, just in case she was born, because it was very important to me that she was dressed well. But her movement started to slow down. We always checked on her with scans and Dopplers, and she was always doing well. She hadn't shown any signs, but I could feel a change in her pattern. One afternoon, Ian's godmother, she's here tonight, called, and I said, "You know, Claire, she's quiet today." She said, "Come on, we'll have some tea and cake, and that'll get her moving." And that did. And I asked my consultant that. I said, "How is that?" What? And he said, "Because she can taste what you eat in your amniotic fluid." So we knew then she was like Mum and she loved cake. So Claire used to buy us Marks and Spencer's blackberry sundaes. So we did. We sat down and we had tea and cake. And she starts crying now, I know. And I got a big kick and stretch. I could feel it. And I was so happy to feel that. I remember hugging her in with my elbows and saying, "There you are, cooking. You hang in there. You're doing great." I told you so. About 30 minutes after that, I got a very bad pain. And Leadon then kicked it in. When Leadon was born, she was perfect. You'd never know there was anything wrong with her. She had dark curly hair. She had long dark eyelashes. She had my nose. And we called her Grumpy Chops. She was grumpy like her sister. The midwives were so caring and wrapped her in a blanket, and she just looked like she was asleep. It took me a while to adjust, to realise that she wasn't alive. We got to bring her home for all our family to meet her and say hello and goodbye in one day. Her funeral was so special. It was packed. The neighbours thought I was insane. We had a bouncy castle, we had balloons, we had a cake. So many people attended her funeral and cried for the loss of her. Because she was our daughter, our niece, our cousin, our sister, our friend, and she mattered. Grief is incredibly painful, as many of you here today know. And any woman that has to go through this and makes either decision does not win. There's no choice here. None of us choose for our babies to be sick. There's no winners. I do know that ending her life will not have given me any healing or peace. And I do firmly believe that if I had aborted her, that I wouldn't be standing here today. 2 nights after Leadon was buried, because I had 2 older children, I jumped out of bed looking for her, because I thought I'd fallen asleep on her. All the mums and dads here would know that feeling. Where are they? Through the bed zone. And I jumped out of bed and I was pulling the blankets and I said, to Michael, where is she? Where is she? He said, because she's not here. And then I kind of woke up and realised where she was. If I had introduced abortion into that grief, I couldn't imagine how I would have coped. They're shouting now about fatal fetal abnormalities, and it makes my heart ache when I hear that. She wasn't a fatal fetal abnormality, she was my daughter. I fear now for women that find themselves in this position now, because do they think that's all that's on offer for them? Is all these random people on social media shouting about fatal fetal abnormalities? I saw one post yesterday and a guy with a yes slogan, and he said, my niece is pregnant with an FFA. I said, no, your niece is pregnant with her child. You know, whatever side you're on, we have to mind our words. Whatever you believe, that is still somebody's baby. The politicians and the media are using cases like Leadon to push for abortion on babies. They're using it as one of these hard cases. It feels like we've been asked to sanction every future abortion based on this. But this is the only thing out there. I would have so much more respect if people just broke it down and said, well, do you know what? If I don't want to be pregnant, I don't want to be pregnant. And I hear it back from a lot of people as well. And I walk away from that argument because that is, they've owned it, they've said it. I know from mothers that have had these babies that time's helped them heal. It's helped them cope with the grief and the loss. So I ask you not to believe that when you hear the term fatal fetal abnormality, that the only compassionate thing to do for these babies and mothers is to abort them. That's unfair. We know from the UK, and I've only started looking into this since about 2 years ago, the high rates of babies being aborted with Down syndrome. Now, I would have given anything for Liadhan to have Down syndrome, anything, because she'd be 4 this August, and I'd have her here. The parents that are aborting these babies in the UK, I don't judge them. It's just it's become a culture of care. When we got the bad news with Liadhan, people were knocking my door with fruit baskets and food and tea bags, saying, what can we do? How can we help? After she was born, we didn't have to buy food for weeks. People rallied to help us, and that is the culture of Ireland, and that is the culture that I am proud of. In the UK, if you get a bad diagnosis prenatally, you're asked, and they even show this in the soaps, that's how acceptable this is, they show it in the soaps. You're asked, are you going to keep it? That's the difference. Ireland is progressive. We're only one of 2 other countries that protect the right to the unborn. That is progressive. Other countries are trying to pull back on their abortion and they can't. We are leading the way. Don't let anybody tell you that we are not progressive, because we protect our most vulnerable. We are not. We are leading the way. It is the right thing to do. And other countries will give anything to have what we have now. I'm giving you, Liadhan's godmother is down there, but I'm giving Liadhan to you for the next 2 weeks. Take her story and share it. Some people that are confused with this issue are especially bothered by these conditions, these sick babies. Take her story and tell people that there's another side, and it's life-limiting condition. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Vicky, for very moving account. I'm now going to throw it open to the floor, and anyone who has any questions, feel free to ask them. Only one per person, please.
That's great.
That sounds like an emergency per person.
Yes.
Sorry. Sorry, this might sound like a stupid question, but I'm just wondering why, like, given the age profile of our politicians, and when I see the age profile here today, it's not very many young people, but like, what's their agenda? Why do they want? Like, when I look at the posters on all the polls, and most of the politicians are pushing for a yes. Like, what's the agenda? Why do they want to murder the unborn?
I think that a small vocal minority have for several years been campaigning, since the X case, since the 2013 case, to have abortion available on a wider basis. I think some of them thought that when we got the 2013 Act, that they might be able to terminate babies rather than pregnancies. And we had a couple of cases where babies were delivered very early, where women were suicidal. One at 25 weeks, so we hear anecdotally that one baby that was delivered isn't doing so well because it is a complication because of its prematurity. And people who were pro-choice at that point were very annoyed. And I can only speak to the ones that I was watching in the legal profession. Some of them got together a couple of years ago and they put together a draft bill that they got labelled women to adopt. And they said in it that under no circumstances should a medical procedure designed to prolong pregnancy in the fetal interest or to result in a live birth be substituted for a termination where a woman was entitled to a termination. So they were very disappointed when they found that the 2013 Act was being interpreted by doctors in the best possible way to look after 2 patients. And so they pushed harder and harder for this. Why are we having it now? Well, isn't it obvious? We have a minority government with the tail wagging the dog, and we had Ms. Mulney, our Minister for Children, looking for a condition of cooperating with the government that she would have a referendum on abortion. That's why we have it. And for the very same reason, if we vote the Eighth Amendment out of the Constitution, you can imagine the kind of pressure that will be brought to bear on future governments by politicians to have the most wide-ranging abortion possible. And the courts will have to help them out, because they will see our decision, if we vote yes, as being an enabling decision for the widest range of abortion.
So one or two people have this agenda.
I don't know. I'm not going to make that statement. I don't know. I can just say that that's the way these things have worked out, and it doesn't really matter. The fact is, we know, Vicky has explained it very well. I actually did a paper. I was so annoyed about this fatal fetal abnormality that in 2015 Peter Gordon and I were debating, and he rubbished me basically. So I did some research and published a paper on it afterwards. I agree completely with what Vicky has said. And there are some people who have been confused into thinking during the course of this campaign that we need abortion to deal with babies like Vicky's, or that we need abortion to deal with women who have been raped. These are the hard cases that they're using to look for a very broad-ranging abortion. But this referendum is not about those hard cases. Because if it was, then we would have given a very different proposal, leaving the eighth in and maybe making a few exceptions. Now, we'd be fighting against that anyway. But that would be a referendum dealing with the hard cases. This is the greatest prize the pro-choice lobby internationally could ever have, to get the Irish people to remove from our constitution the protection for life. And if we remove the protection for life from one category of humans in our midst, you can be absolutely sure it's devalued for all. You may not know this, but the Justice Committee of the Oireachtas has been working since last autumn on heads of a bill on assisted suicide. And if this goes through, of course, how much easier it will be to argue that case. But this case is about the right to life in our Constitution, and whether or not, even if you didn't like it, you have to see it has worked. It has kept abortion from our shores. I know there are people going to England. There are people in France going to Holland and going to Belgium, where they may be able to get abortion more easily. These are facts which we have to address, and we have to look to do something about. At least I can say, the pro-life campaign and other pro-life groups put huge pressure on the government numbers of years ago. We got the Crisis Pregnancy Agency. I don't know a single pro-life person who isn't involved in some capacity in charitable work that has something to do with children or mothers. I really don't. And that's over 20 plus years, So the government depends on all of us a lot for what we do. I hope we win. When we win on the 26th, I want to see all the pro-life groups sit together at a table and say to the government, we want you to support women. We know that the Guttmacher Institute, the Trinity study, all the studies that have been done, women are asked why they have abortions. It's not because they wanted the choice, it's because they saw no other choice. It's because their partners didn't support them, it's because they didn't have financial assistance, it's because they thought they couldn't finish their education. We can address those things, and we can continue to be a beacon. Any other question? Yes.
I can't vote because I am not Irish and I don't have Irish citizenship, but I'm trying to influence people on social media as much as I can to vote for no, because obviously I'm for right.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And the problem I see myself is that with propaganda, my body, my choice really has overtaken the minds of many young people. They don't really see the essence of what they are hoping, or the essence of the problems. They don't see the life behind that. They see this battle between them and the government. So they are so much against no government will not tell me what I can do with my body. So they don't see the baby, they don't see the life. And I don't actually know how to get through that wall. But I've only 2 weeks left. And I was trying to post this and post that, and people are becoming very aggressive and they shoot their ears and they see only that, my body, my child. And they are contradicting themselves, I can decide about me and my body. And this is what I was trying to say, as Professor said, look, but you were that person in the room, so you have to start somewhere. You're the same person. What if your mother decided to abort you, terminate you? You wouldn't be saying what you're saying right now. I don't know how to get into their minds and trying, and if you can give me any advice, what words to use, what to say, how to speak, you know, like I don't know how to get to them.
I remember when my first pregnancy, I was 22 years old. It was a planned pregnancy. I had no idea what was going on. Now that I'm 41, I look back then and I was a baby. Even when she was born, Shannon's 19 now, when she was born, I was kind of like, is this mine now? Do I take this home? I think she was about 3 months when she started looking at me and stuff, and I was like, oh yeah, you're definitely mine, so. Now I don't know, that could just be me, bad maternal instinct though, I don't know, but I think when you're young, it's very hard to put that into somebody's head, what we're actually giving away. Before I had Aidan, I would have always been pro-life, and I would have always been like these people who say, well, I never have an abortion, which is false compassion, but I never have an abortion, but if somebody else did, is it really my business? Now, I would have been one of those people. I never would have campaigned for pro-life. But it was after having Aidan and reading the statistics from 2016 in the UK, and they have all grounds in the UK for abortion. So it goes from A to F. F is if the mother's life is in danger. Now, in 2016, then we had 6 abortions for that, 6, for if the woman's life is in danger. There was in total 190,406 abortions performed in 2016. And that's just England and Wales, that doesn't include Scotland. But grounds E is where there may be, this is the wording, I'm quoting, there may be a risk of significant handicap to the child should it be born. Now under these grounds, well, we think it should be life-limiting conditions if that's so what the mother wished. 9 babies were aborted with cleft palate. 706 babies with Down syndrome. 706. I don't know. I try and tell younger people that. I try and tell them that life is very precious, that this is a very slippery slope to think about future, to think of themselves when they have a wanted pregnancy. I know young people, I've just done 2 weeks on the roadshow, talking to a lot of young girls. Some have even burst into tears saying, if I went home pregnant, my dad would kill me, or I would be put out on the street. And they have this genuine fear. So we need to make sure that there's better education and supports there for these young girls, that they don't have that fear. And as I said to these girls, I talk about anything. I have a big mouth and it gets me in trouble. And I talk about anything. And I said to these girls, well, that's your choice. That's where your body, your choice comes in. Know your contraception. Know your body. Know what you're doing. Take control of it. Don't wait until somebody else's body is involved for you to say that you want the choice. I hope that helps.
Okay, are there any other questions? Yes.
Thank you very much. I have been going to ask about the doctor's position and midwives, and that in the case of it being repealed, but Dr. O'Reilly has already explained that you were told that you can refer your patient to somebody else that will perform the termination. But I just wanted to say my daughter got pregnant in her first year in college, and I only found out by accident she was going to travel to have termination. Now, I didn't influence her in any way. I just asked her to do one thing, to go for counselling. And incidentally, her boyfriend wanted her to have the baby, and I'd say that was probably more of an influence than me. She just knew my views on it, but she was determined to have a termination. She didn't, and her girl is 12 years old now. But anyway, while she was in secondary school, two of her friends, or two girls in her year, got pregnant. Both of them had terminations, and both of them went on to have another child and keep it. So it just, and one of them was rather a sad case. The baby died at 6 years of age, or baby she wanted, after having a termination. But that's just fate, I suppose. And I'm just worried because I looked at the papers and I just saw this meeting, but I've seen three where Mick Wallace and Claire Daly are, around the county. So I just feel this is going to be defeated because there isn't enough meetings like this, and I hope not.
It's not the meetings. I mean, the one thing, look, we've come down from Dublin, we've come from Waterford, we've come from all over the place.
I collected 50 posters before I drove up here
Yeah,
tonight.
I mean, everybody's doing what they can. There isn't a single person in this room. If you sit on the chairs for the next 2 weeks, you should be not, because we have so much work to do. And if you have a defeatist attitude, then defeat is what you'll get. I mean, we have to get up and we have to get out there. And I know it's difficult. I know the media is not particularly interested in hearing our story very much. I know that Google has shut down advertising. I know that there is a difficulty getting the message out. But the message is on our side. Even if a lot of people have been infused into a middle ground where they think there are hard cases that they absolutely have to accept this for, the fact is this doesn't deal with hard cases. This deals with every baby. This is a blank check. Your decision, if you vote yes, will be for generations ahead, and it won't be restricted, and it won't be limited. And somebody's having trouble making a connection. So it's talk to your daughter, talk to her friends, get her to talk to her friends. Everybody else on the other side is doing it. We need to get talking. We're going to see so much advertising in the next week or two. We're going to see other cases crawl out of the woodwork. But say to yourself, if all these hard cases seriously needed abortion, then why are our maternal mortality statistics so good? Why are our morbidity, that serious illness and pregnancy statistics, so good? And why are a host of obstetricians now coming out to give out about the campaigning that's being done by a handful of very vocal obstetricians? Obstetricians are no more in a position to demand this than anybody else is. It's simply a decision. People are either pro-life or they're not. And it's never been demonstrated to be medically necessary. So when you hear doctors talking and saying women are dying, you've heard me say tonight why they didn't. And why in those cases, how can you suggest even that a woman who's brain dead died because of the AIDS? And the other ones, look at them. I've looked at them really, really carefully. You just need to look at what people are saying and question what they're saying. Because there's an awful lot of misinformation out there outside.
There is actually a second meeting in Wexford Town on Thursday in the Talbot Hotel. One of the speakers being John Waters. So that's been organised by Wexford Pro-Life, and I'd invite everybody to attend that, because there will be another set of wonderful speakers with various viewpoints, and you're more than welcome to that.
Can I just say to the lady who's looking for information for young people, I know this is it's a very simple website. It's not associated with any of the pro-life groups, including the one I volunteer with. All it is abortioninfo.ie, and they have videos that they borrowed from all of our sites, I think, and they've got just simple stuff on it. But it's good for young people because it's very straightforward, it's very visual, and it's abortioninfo.ie. It's an easy one to remember. Yeah.
So there's another question. I think this will be the last question because, there's another one here, and this will be the last thing, all right?
Happy days, good days. I would just like to say that on Thursday night, we thought it unfortunately, we really endured praying to you all. The diocese. Sorry?
Somebody's phone is ringing very loud.
Go on.
Like you were singing a very lovely song. Thank you very much.
Okay, to start again.
I think we've moved into the next century, really. I just like to encourage people to go on Thursday night to the Talbot, because there's one speaker there who I have personally worked with, and that's Bernadette Goulding, and she will be talking about Rachel's Vineyard Ministry. And
And I have sat and I have watched women weep and cry that have had abortions. They can't sleep at night, they're guilty, they have shame, and that's precisely what Bernadette's mission is, to help these people through counselling and to bring them through the Word of God into a place where they can have peace. But many of them will say that the guilt and the shame remains with them, and many of them have tried to have children after having had an abortion, and they weren't as lucky as the girl who was able to go and have a baby. But maybe we need to hear this too, but the pro-choice will not be telling you that. That's all. So please go, if you can, on Thursday night to the toilet.
Okay. I'm quite alarmed at the amount of people that I'm hearing from acquaintances, neighbours, people in passing, who are going to vote on behalf of their children. Now, their children seem to think that abortion is something that's needed in this country. And that the parents try and put forward the message that life is so important, that this is their grandchildren, their nieces, their nephews, possibly that the children, that their offspring are talking about. But it's quite worrying that others are, that people are going to vote yes on behalf of others. I mean, I thought it was one vote, one person. Is this even a legal situation? Or how would we try and change the hearts and minds of those who want to think they're doing good by voting yes on behalf of another human being?
I think you're saying it's hard. I think you're saying it's hard that it can't convince people that it's wrong. I just feel that you can't convince people that it's wrong. No matter how convincing you might sound.
Okay, myself and Caroline will take this. So, again, like Caroline said, we're not going to win this if you've got this attitude. We have 2 weeks left. Now, at this stage, I've done so many of these meetings and talks, and I've done them graciously, and so has Andy. We're sick of listening to you, aren't we? We've done them. You need to be out there. Fix posters. If they're turned the wrong way, get up on something and fix a poster. I see lots of leaflets there. You don't have to knock doors. You can give out leaflets. Fix posters. Talk to people you know. Go to a street canvas, but just be a presence there. You don't have to talk to people. I know more than anybody it's scary. I'm getting in awful trouble at the minute on Twitter. I'm being called a racist, something that I'm absolutely not, and I'm being slaughtered, and so is my 19-year-old daughter. And I've never hurt anybody in my life. But I'm taking this. I'm taking this because whatever happens after this, I will close my eyes and I will know that I've done everything I could. And I want everybody in here to say that they feel the same, that they can say, I've done everything I could to stop this. Now just for a second, not the pro-choicers, just the pro-lifers. Close your eyes and think, how are you going to feel if we lose, okay? I said not the pro-choicers. Now close your eyes and think how you feel if we win and we stop the vile practice that is abortion coming into Ireland. How will you feel? How will you feel? Is nobody excited because you feel like you're going to win? Yes. Yeah, you're excited. Yes. So you need to take that feeling and you need to bring it with you and be brave. And be brave, and you need to be out. The meetings are great because it's good to be around like-minded people, and we need that support. It can be lonely being pro-life, and it can be scary. I don't know how that happened, but it can. But you need to be able to say to yourselves, I've done everything I could.
get up out of your bed on the 26th and you say, oh my God, I wish I'd done something. We're warning you now. You've one chance. You've one life. You've one chance. So just get up and get out and do this. Because none of us can do it on our own. We cannot do it on our own. We cannot do it without you. Each one of you has a responsibility for this. We're the only country where the individual citizen will go with a pen in the hand and put an X in the box that will decide for the future, for all babies, what is going to happen. You have a huge responsibility. I don't think any other country has had that.
Sorry, just even at this late stage, could we not devise something to bring the so-called pro-choice people on board with their arguments, so that do they have rallies or meetings like this one that we could attend and put those points to them? How many pro-choice people are here tonight to challenge our arguments? I would put my hand in my heart and I'd say 0, because they haven't the courage to come in here.
Just one thing on that. I was at a meeting in Waterford last week, which in fact was organised by a parish priest with 3 parishes, and it was very much pro-choice and pro-life. In fact, sitting in front of me there were 4 rows of nearly 8 people who were live streaming onto Waterford's Together for Yes site. So we have had the odd one. How useful they are in that sense, I don't know. But if I don't think that they are, quite frankly. I think we've got to go out and talk to people who are not campaigning on this side, because the Yes campaigners have made up their minds, and you're not going to change them before the 25th. It's the other people that you need to talk to. And I tell you something, again, it just occurs to me about young people. I have daughters your age, that's his age. And it was funny, it wasn't funny at all. There were 3 women who came to Ireland from America. Rebecca Kisling, who was born as a result of rape, Jennifer Christie and Shauna Pruitt, who were raped and became pregnant. They came and they were to speak in a hotel in Dublin, and when the pro-choice brigade got onto the staff of the hotel, they intimidated them so much that their booking was cancelled. They went to a second Dublin hotel and the same thing happened again. So they had to hold their meeting in the street. And I heard about this, and I watched an interview that was done with him on YouTube, and I was literally moved to tears. And I got on my WhatsApp, family WhatsApp, and said to the girls, you've got to watch this is absolutely amazing. And my lassie, who was the same age here as Vicky's, sent me back a text, now you know why I took the electric kettle this morning. They're coming into college, and we're going to see them on the DL, which I know is, we'd say on the QT, on the down low. So they sneaked into college, and I knew people who came from different colleges to hear them. 50 people heard them. They were all moved to tears. Jennifer Christie was left for dead by a serial rapist in the stairwell of a motel. She was so badly injured, I'm not even going to tell you. And when she came out of hospital sometime later and was back at work trying to forget about it, she discovered she was pregnant. Shauna Pruitt was the same, raped, and then she went on to study law and become a prosecutor and get involved in cases like this. Those women were absolutely inspirational. And it wasn't that many years, I think it was 4 years since Jennifer was raped. It was absolutely extraordinary. They really got through to my daughters. And they said to me that they wished that every young person in the country, pro-choice, pro-life, everybody could hear them. Because if everybody could hear them, there'd be no argument about rape. None. No, it's just again, just because it isn't any group and people are desperate to get information out to young people. And that's all it is. It's a couple of individuals who did this by themselves, and I know that they borrowed from everybody's site. So abortioninfo.ie, there are cards there. Who? Oh, Shauna Pruitt, those women who were raped, the video of them is on that site too. So they just borrowed it. It's what would you call that? It's kind of a forum where it's like an aggregator from all the other websites. So look at that, abortion info, tell them to look at that, abortioninfo.ie. But you need to commit tonight to get up, get out and canvass. So talk to the people who've organised the meeting this evening. Talk to them and ask them what you can do. And even if it's just to start as a large group, even if you're seen in large groups like canvassing, don't be upset. Put the stickers on your car. If we can't demonstrate the fact that we're pro-life, then the other side have won already.
Okay, well, this brings our information. Sorry? Oh, I'm sorry.
I just would like to invite anybody who would be willing to help me put posters around the county over the next 10 years or so. I'm ready to help people. I've been doing it for the last week or so, but I'm finding it difficult to get somebody to come with me. So if anyone would like to volunteer for work with me.
Who will go with this gentleman to do the post trick? Can we have a volunteer, please? Thank you. Lady? Would the lady have the right to go over and talk to this man here on the left?
Yeah.
Is there no man among you who will get up and man up and help him?
Certainly,
Thank you.
we'll take the details, we're postering
Excellent. Talk to
Yeah, no, gentlemen, how did you, I'm just saying, I'm
Don't
doing
leave
it
the room
around
without
the rural
talking to
areas.
each other.
It's very slow. You do 4 or 5 villages a week, but I think it have a brilliant impact in a rural village, because there's no yes voters out there, and it just gives kind of a sense of, for like the strong particular villages, and I just think that somebody that's with me,
Well, yeah.
I'm willing to do it.
I organise that, yeah.
Lovely.
I'll talk to you afterwards, I get your number.